Hello, good people. Welcome. I will allow the room to fill up a little for a moment whilst you all take your seats. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. It seems strange saying that because it's the 18th of January, so we feel like 2024 is already well underway. But Happy New Year to you all. I hope you had a great Christmas and New Year, or whatever that period of time meant to you personally or socially. But here we are. I'm currently in Gothenburg at the head office. Outside, although you can see through the window, you can see blue sky, but the landscape is covered in snow. It is incredible. Let me reassure you that I went for a run last night and I still wore shorts. It's still definitely shorts weather, but it's great to have you all with us. And with me today on this first meetings of minds for 2024, I have our very own Ida Marie Pedersen from our product team, who's going to join me on this January edition. So welcome, Ida. Would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and it's gorgeous in Norway as well today. It's freezing, minus 15 degrees, and half a meter of snow everywhere.
Well, we were actually, so just whilst people take that, we were meant to be in Norway yesterday. We were meant to have a full product team meeting at Faun all together, and the travel disruption caused by the storm and the snow prevented it from happening. So I was able to get to Gothenburg, and then we all spent the entire day online. So Ida and I are used to seeing each other this big on a screen. But today, importantly, as we kickstart the year, you will all know that a lot of people all around the world embrace the incoming new year with a notion of opportunity. And it's often said, this idea of new year, new you, or new year, new me. And there's a lot of cynicism around that attitude, but I welcome it. I think any opportunity to start to do something better, particularly if it's aligned with or potentially benefits your health, is a great opportunity. So I am not cynical whatsoever. I think, great, if now your attention is on this, let's grab it and let's make you successful. The problem we have is, statistically, if you start a new health regime at this time of year, you're most likely to fail. And maybe that's because so many people are starting. Maybe that's because in the Northern Hemisphere, people are dealing with the fact that there's snow outside and there's winds and rain and who knows what. But the fact is that for the vast majority of people who start a new health kick regime in a January, they fail. They've actually quit by the second week of February, and the majority of the rest of them have finished by March. And so the reason why Ida and I are here today to discuss this, well, first of all, I don't know if you remember this, Ida, but one of the first conversations that Ida and I ever had professionally was about lifestyle change and adopting a better approach towards nutrition, towards physical activity and exercise, and how we can do this not just for a short-term result, but actually for long-term health. So it's wholly appropriate that Ida and I are here. Secondly, as well as we have other experts in the team who are immersed in this type of stuff, it's being a big part of Ida's background, something that she's focused on and supported a lot of individuals and groups of people with. And then thirdly, and perhaps most poignantly, when we start to consider how what we do at Zinzino aligns with and enables people and benefits people to be more successful when it comes to manufacturing a health change related to their diet. Ida's been here the longest. A lot of the products that come under her management category fit perfectly into that box. And so that's why we're here to discuss. But before I do, I'm going to give you a word of warning, because unusually for me, I've actually prepared a lot of slides, which I don't normally do. I normally put together 2 or 3 slides at best. But I wanted to go through some real core aspects of actionable data when it comes to what the research tells us, what people think, the misconception, what the research tells us, and what we can actually do. And so really for the next, I will try and deal with this in 25 to 30 minutes. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a prepared presentation to go through some of those key themes. Either is welcome to interrupt, contribute, comment as she sees fit. But once I've gone through this more formal part of the meeting of minds, then either and I are going to delve into it and unpack it and discuss it a little bit more. Because there is always debate to be had. There is always discussion to be had. And in fact, even not long before this meetings of minds, Ida and I were on the phone and we were discussing. And even then, we realized there was something that we were actually positioning differently and thinking about in a different way. So debate is always encouraged. That, to me, is one of the finest attributes of science, is that we debate and we discuss. Most importantly, we change our attitude and we change our action based on the best available evidence, and that might change. Science research is adaptable, and we should be too. We should keep up to date with the best guidelines and the best advice. So let me share my screen. Let me bring this deck up, he says, which should, excuse me, whilst I turn that into a full screen. There we go. Right then. The sustainable route to better health. Nutrition for long-term success, because too many people treat nutrition like an intervention. So they will say, you know, I'm going to go on holiday, I've got vacation, so I'm going to do this to achieve this. And actually, whilst that might be something you feel you need to do, repeated episodes of this typically don't make a situation great. What's far better is to have a really considered, sustainable approach to our health and nutrition, that we manage that for most of the time. And then there might be times when we need to adjust things a little bit. It might be for a sporting event. It could be because, you know, you want to be a little bit leaner when you take that vacation in the sun, but it shouldn't be interventional, going from a really poor point to this interpretation of a great point, because health is every day. Health is not for a selfie. It's not for a vacation. It's not for a social media post. Health is how we live and how we engage with the world. So that's what today is about. So what we will learn is a blueprint for improved body composition. There's too much mysticism around managing your body weight. That's why there are hundreds of products that are promising you the world, that are saying that they can help you to achieve miraculous results in no time whatsoever. It's a huge industry. But actually, there's a real simplicity. There's a real simplicity to managing our body weight, to controlling our metabolism, and actually to have an overall improved health. And that's what we're going to unpack today. The way I've decided to structure it is, what is the common idea or conception, misconception? What do people think? And then a little look at what the science actually says. So as we go through each aspect, we'll look at how people typically think, and let's compare that to the science. So energy balance, let's start from there. Let's start with this huge notion of energy in versus energy out, more commonly known as calorie intake, the amount of energy we consume versus the things that we do. So calories in is our food. From any type of food that contains any type of energy, we will derive some calories, some energy, as well as all those macronutrients and micronutrient benefits to that. We take a sort of energy, typically reported in what we call kcals, calories, okay? What we spend is the thermic effect of activity. So everything we do creates heat. And so when we move around, when we engage in some exercise, we are creating heat, and that's the release of energy. Remember, energy can neither be destroyed nor created. It can only be exchanged. So we take one type of energy and we express it and we change it in another way. Diet-induced thermogenesis gets way too much attention, in my opinion, because what we're discussing here is that it takes energy to break down energy. So when you eat a piece of fish, There's protein in that. There are those really good fats that are in there. Well, let's say that piece of fish has 100 kcals, 100 calories. It's going to cost you, arguably, something like 15 to 20 kcals to break it down and to digest it and absorb it. And this is what's the diet-induced thermogenesis. But there's also diet-induced thermogenesis, is when we don't eat, and the impact that that has on the energy that we spend. So there's the thermogenesis, the cost of eating something, and then there's the cost of not eating something. And then we have resting metabolic rate. And that is literally what you cost to keep alive, to keep all systems functioning in energy every 24 hours, based on either lying flat or your daily activity, going about your work, or the exercise that you do. But the resting metabolic rate is just what it costs to keep you alive at rest every single day. So these are our methods of out. So the common misconceptions: calories don't count. It's not worth tracking calories. Sadly, calories do count, but people get obsessed counting calories. And it's one of those areas that we know that if we're just mindful of it, if we keep a track of it, then we keep them in check and we make sure that we don't consume too many. Because it's the simple ratio is this, is that your needs have a certain amount. All those things we discussed, rest and metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, thermogenesis of activity, that comes out at a total. If we eat more than that cost, then we will gain weight. If we break even, we maintain our weight. And if we reduce our calories, we effectively lose weight. There is way more to it than this. And I don't actually encourage people to become obsessed with counting calories. But maybe, not maybe, there's a benefit to doing it for a short period of time, which is to learn about portion size, to have an understanding of how much energy you are consuming through your diet, so that you can pitch it at the right level. If you need to lose weight, you can create a calorie-induced deficit. If you'd like to gain weight, we can consume a little bit more so that we can put on more muscle mass. And if we're looking to maintain, having an understanding. But study after study has gone to show a simple fact, that when we don't have any idea over that portion size control, that is the fast track to systematic overeating. And it is overconsumption that leads to overweight, that leads to obesity, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and other consequences that are related to excessive consumption of food energy. If we're going to lose weight, the fundamental thing is to make sure that we create a calorie deficit. But it's way more nuanced than that. What I greatly dislike are so-called health experts who'll say it doesn't matter what you eat so long as you've got a calorie deficit. It's not true. It's simply not true. If you are consuming the types of food that encourage your appetite and prompt you to eat more, you will. You can't tap the brakes and press the accelerator at the same time. It just doesn't work. And those types of food, those energy high, nutrient low foods, are constantly hitting the accelerator. They're also bringing about changes with regards to ghrelin, the hunger hormone, leptin, the appetite control hormone, which is also monitoring body fat reserves, and it interferes with those signals. So the key thing is to always think about food quality, but always, if we're going to manage or effectively lose weight, think about calorie quantity, to be mindful of it. Take some time to equate it, estimate it, and then move on through and adopt a sustainable diet that is in keeping with it. Because of that, because of our changes of activity, there are different ways of doing it. And I really don't want you to become obsessed. But what I would say is, in a week, calculate your requirements for 3 types of day. A sedentary day, where you don't really do anything. A low active day, where you might just do 1 exercise session. And an active day, where you might be really active at work, at home. You might do 2 exercise sessions, whatever it is, a more active day. And then adjust your calorie requirement. So for weight loss, if you've counted your calories and you need to lose weight, and you estimate that your calorie intake was 2,500, the best and the most sustainable rate is to reduce 10 to 15%. So you would take 250, 300 kcals off, and you would be under consuming. For weight gain, you would add, and typically that would come from proteins and fats, not carbohydrates. You would increase the amount of proteins and fats in the diet. The way to do this is to track your food either using an app, do some counting, or follow a planner. That can be a really effective way. But what I will say is that it's really important that you get the scale of it. You make it so that it's a practical, real way to live, which we're going to look at the moment, and then you move on. You cannot spend your whole life counting calories. That would just be horrendous, practically, and even with regards to an outcome. But there might be times we recalibrate and go back in. So we've got an idea. We're going to quantify those things. Let's look at eating structure and timing. And this is actually a place that I've done a lot of research myself in the background, is when we start to look at what we call the fundamental rhythm, the circadian clock that drives our hormones, that drives our physiological activity, and whether we can work with it, which is typically leads to real great success, or persist trying to work against it, which typically leads to less effective outcomes. And so when we combine an eating window with an eating structure, we can be really effective. Now, we don't have time to go into intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating. They would be talks on their own. But I would encourage you to think about how much of an eating window do you function within. I'm a huge fan of the 16-8 time-restricted eating most days of the week, purely because we bring about a huge amount of endocrine release, gastric release, so the stomach isn't constantly having to digest and absorb food. And also it helps us to effectively control the amount we eat without us being obsessed with calories. And so if we were to adopt a routine whereby we were looking at a eating structure and an eating window, it would look something like this. So around about 11 o'clock in the morning, we would take on some breakfast, have our lunch a couple of hours later, snack late afternoon, dinner around about 17:30, and then a light snack 1900 hours. So we've had 3 meals, 2 snacks, making sure we're eating sufficient amounts with an eye for quality on our food, which we'll come back to. We've contained the metabolic window within those 8 hours, and we've allowed that 16-hour fasted. I get asked about this a lot. And when it either comes back into the talk, I'm going to ask her about this. Lots of people ask me about time-restricted and intermittent fasting. For me, this is a really effective way to combine all worlds. You have a clear structure, plus you make sure you're not overwhelming the stomach, you're not overwhelming the digestive system for too much of the day, which leads to really poor outcomes and allows people to systematically overeat. So, common beliefs and misconceptions. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Technically, that's true. And there's a lot of studies that have said that people who skip breakfast will typically, they're more likely to overeat. But breakfast is a mindset, because breakfast doesn't mean you have to get up and you have to eat at 7 o'clock in the morning. Breakfast is literally how you break your fast. So there's been a period that you haven't eaten for, more than likely overnight whilst you've been asleep. And until you actually consume some food, take some nutrition on board, you are in a fasted state. Where you look at the research that says, okay, so perhaps I take my breakfast at 11 o'clock, for instance. The important part is not that you've delayed when that breakfast happens. That can be really positively powerful. The important part is, well, what is that meal made of? That's where this notion of skipping a meal starts to lead to poor outcomes. If at that breaking of the fast, even though it's later in the morning, you take on some really good quality protein, if you've got some really good complex quality carbohydrates, some fibrous carbohydrates, So let's say, for instance, you're having something like a bowl of porridge with chia seeds in there, blueberries, raspberries, you've got some sliced banana. Incredible, incredible meal. That doesn't fit in with this narrative of skipping a meal. Let's say your breakfast was scrambled egg with avocado, smoked salmon on sourdough bread, protein, essential fats, good source of complex carbohydrates, fiber. Again, brilliant. The fact that it happened at 11 o'clock is irrelevant. That's another powerful positive. Another one is that eating before bed will make you gain weight. There is a lot of evidence that says late night sleeping actually has quite a physiological impact on how our body regulates fat and fat oxidation, and can actually lead to the increased storage of fat. But we never advocate late night eating anyway, late, and particularly meals. And when we say late night, we're talking after 2000 hours, like 2100 hours, 22. It's better to ease off at that time. And then there's this notion that I see a lot now, the time restricted eating harms the body. Doesn't harm the body. All the best evidence goes to show that managing our metabolic window has positive impact on our endocrine system, on our digestive system, on the gut microbiota. We see tons of benefit with regards to appetite modulation and management, weight management. The research that reports negative associations is losing ground. It's a poor argument in the modern world. There's been so much good evidence to show the benefits of containing the metabolic window. So the way that you can also consider these things is against that circadian rhythm. And I want you to bear a few things in mind. When you wake up early hour of the morning, as our core temperature is rising, cortisol spikes. So the stress hormones are higher, and ghrelin spikes around about 8 a.m. It's a good idea to leave that time alone and to not consume food unless you really have to. I appreciate that some people might be working on shifts and working overnight, and that's a different set of circumstances. But if you can avoid eating in this time, you're in a good place. Around about midday, ghrelin spikes again. Late afternoon, we see 2 to 6 p.m. insulin is elevated. So our insulin is at a higher level. And 6 p.m., again, we get another ghrelin spike. And ghrelin is the one that is driving that appetite that's within us. In the evening, we see like between 1600 hours and 2 a.m. leptin, regulating those body fat reserves, managing our appetite. It's elevated. And then very late evening, melatonin is high, which is our sleep hormone. So we can see there are oscillations and rhythms here that we can work with or we can work against. And the key part is to establish a routine that fits best in the morning and the evening. In the morning, avoid the period in which the body is under a kind of primed stress state. And in the evening, try not to do things that are going to interfere with the sleep-wake cycle. Because the number one most powerful way to manage good health and actually to manage body weight is to make sure you sleep every night. Every type of research that's been done, calorie counting versus this, exercise versus that. When we add in the sleep component, quality sleep, 6 to 7 hours most nights, we see the best outcomes for overall health and weight management. So the early part of the day, avoid the stress, let the digestive system have it easy, offset your breakfast. In the evening, don't overwhelm it with meals and snacks. Let the system recuperate, repair, restore, and get you set for the next day. Okay, let's go through some macronutrients now. Protein, fats, carbohydrates. Too much mythology in these areas. They're quite simple, and I hope to make them even more clear for you now. So protein, most people don't eat enough. True. But then you've got those crazy people online who want people to eat too much. And as always, moderation is key. More than probably what you take now, but you don't need to become a protein junkie. Misconceptions. Doesn't matter what you eat, just make sure you eat more protein. It's not true. leucine content of protein is the strongest one when it comes to determining the quality of the muscle mass, maintaining our muscle, which is really important. The number one indicator of life satisfaction as we age is our physical independence, how well we can move, look after ourselves. And that is wholly reliant on our musculature, making sure that we maintain our muscle mass as we age. So leucine is the most highly correlated type of protein that supports the preservation, development of muscle mass. Excessive protein can't be absorbed. It's not true. We don't know. There is an individual upper limit. At the same time, there are individual tolerances. And I'll come on to some of the guidelines that are more specific now. But this notion that there is a 30-gram limit and beyond that, it'll all get wasted, it's just not true. It depends on your age, your sex, your levels of activity, type of activity. There are so many things that influence it. So don't buy into these myths. And there's a notion that to build muscle, you have to take a supplement. Not true. Supplements can be so convenient. They can be really powerful part of it, especially when we need to increase amounts of certain things that we need to have. But a good, well-balanced diet will carry you a long way. And remember, a good, well-balanced diet is the foundation of everything we do. And we look to supplement intelligently. And we look to supplement to cover gaps. And some of those gaps are huge, which in the modern world, supplements are not only a good way, they're often the best way. We'll come back to that in a moment. But could you technically consume enough protein from your diet to satisfy your muscle build and maintenance needs? Yes. It would be tough, though. I'm going to be really honest with you. It is tough, but it is also very, very possible. So how much? Ideal guidelines are something between 25 to 40 grams per meal when it comes to protein. But a really good ratio that I'd like to draw your attention to is this one here. We know research paper after research paper that has looked into this. Most effective rate is 0.4 grams per kilogram of your own body mass, your fat-free mass per meal. Most effective muscle protein synthesis, absorption, digestion, that's the magic rate. So I can't say to you, you need to take this amount because I don't know your fat, I don't know your body mass, don't know what type of training you do. But across all those parameters, where the researchers looked at it, this is the effective range right here, 0.4 grams per kilogram of the fat-free mass. And there is an example there of that. Type of protein, quality. Ignore everything else on this page. Just read that one line again. Quality, quality, quality. The same can be true of all aspects of your food. The quality of your food is far more of an influence than the quantity of it. If you get the quality right, the quantity kind of takes care of itself. Fats. Somewhere, I think it was back in the 1970s, some clever marketing institute convinced the world that eating fat made them fat. And it's just not true. Fats are essential for health. And certainly when we start to look at the polyunsaturated fatty acids, and for sure, when we start to consider our omega-3 needs, these are essential components of health and performance. Eating fat does not lead to excessive weight. Eating too much of anything leads to excessive weight, but not eating fat. Fat is essential. Low-fat versions of food are better for us. No, they're not. They're really not. They're chemical chaos in a packet more often than not. What they take out, they make up for with other nefarious and awful means. Typically fill them full of sugar or all kinds of things they do to strike a better balance. I promise you, nature is best. And that's actually the key point in here. Saturated fats are harmful. That's not always true either. The type of source of the fat is actually the critical indicator. And all of the best current research goes to show that when it comes to the essentials, making sure we have a sufficient amount of polyunsaturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fatty acids, these lower our risks of all types of diseases, particularly coronary artery disease and certain types of other non-communicable disease. But even when we look at something like a saturated fat, if we're deriving that from a really good quality whole food source, positive outcomes. When there is an interaction with ultra processed foods, that's where things go downhill rapidly. So if we look at this now, this example here, if we've got whole fat that's derived from dairy products, unprocessed meats, and even what we derive from chocolate has a complex food matrix, and what we see study after study after study is that there is no increased CVD or diabetes risk associated with eating those good quality variants. The problem is where those ultra processed foods come in. And do you remember maybe 15 minutes ago, I talked about why what we eat is so important. Hitting the brakes and the accelerator at the same time just causes the engine to stall. It's never good. It's the quality of what we do, central to everything that we do. A whole food diet or a diet that is far more made of whole foods will carry you a lot further with intelligent supplementation. That is the art to get nutritional health right. So it's important that you don't think of the two as the same. Where you see fat listed or commented on in a processed, ultra-processed food, think of it as entirely different to where you would see a fat that is commented on or explained when it comes to unprocessed red meat or whole food derivatives. They should literally have a different word for it. That's how different they are. So, how much fat? The Nordic Nutrition Recommendations 2023 recommends that total fat should constitute 25 to 40% of our total energy intake. And I must stress at this point, 1 gram of protein or 1 gram of carbohydrate equals approximately 4 calories, 4 kcals, whereas 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 kcals. So double, more than double. So when we're monitoring it this way as a percentage, remember 1 gram is literally like for like twice the amount of the others. So the ratio is not that simple. We're converting a total into a percentage. Type of the quality that we want: saturated fat from whole fat dairy, but in lower amounts. Monosaturated fats from nuts, avocado, olive oil, and then our polyunsaturated fats from nuts, seeds, fish. Obviously, fish is where we're going to derive that DHA and EPA. We can't get that from those plant derivatives, so it's essential that we have an equivalent from them. And the key thing is the timing. Distribute it equally across the day, avoid large amount before sleep, and consume omega-6, omega-3, alpha-lipoic acid after exercise as a part of a recovery strategy. And that's a bit of an insight really to what the top performance teams do and organizations around the world now when it comes to the sport strategy on that. Most people, I would argue, already consume enough or too much omega-6. And I would again just get you to focus all of your attention on the omega-3 as a part of a recovery strategy when it comes to exercise. So I'm mindful of time. So I'm going to go through carbohydrates and then I'm going to invite Ida back into the debate so that we can discuss things more. So, common beliefs and conceptions. Eating carbohydrates leads to weight gain. I remember it well. The low carb, no carb days where the world looked like a zombie apocalypse whilst people showed up to exercise withdrawn, cheeks sunk in because they were on the low carb diet. They would do a terrible exercise session, but it felt tough. And people think that a tough session is a good session. So they thought, brilliant. My jeans don't fit. Exercise feels tough. Everything must be going great. Carbohydrates are essential. They fuel performance at higher intensities, and higher intensity exercise gives us so many profound benefits. And there's a difference. Again, the way we've looked at fats and proteins under a different light, there are good carbs and there are not so good carbs. Refined carbohydrates are not our best friend. Complex carbohydrates, fibrous carbohydrates are an essential part of a diet. There's this notion that you'll burn more fat if you eat more carbs. Nonsense. Low carb diets are healthier. Nonsense. Carbohydrates provide fiber. Carbohydrates provide energy for cognition, for brain power. They drive the system from an energy point of view. We just got to have a preference for quality. We've got to make sure that we're getting good quality, complex carbohydrates, rich fibrous carbohydrates, and we're avoiding things that are really refined, of a high glycemic load and aggravating the system. That's it. So you don't need someone like me to say it, but I will say it. Reduce your reliance on sugar. That's it. Reduce your reliance on sugar. If you are cutting back on your use of processed and ultra-processed foods, you're going to take huge steps in the right direction when it comes to your proteins, your fats, and your carbohydrates. But be mindful of quality. Go and purposely look for better quality carbohydrates. So we've also seen that there's something of a physiological interaction. When a person who has excessive weight, heading towards metabolic syndrome or something like type 2 diabetes, actually reducing overall carbohydrate intake has quite a rapid, profound impact on them regaining control of their glycemic control, insulin response, and leads to quite a measurable reduction in weight. So it could be that when we're thinking of things as an intervention, in those instances, we would have a period of time, 4 to 8 weeks, where we would induce that to then get into a more sustainable route of a preference for good quality complex carbohydrates, choosing better options and not excluding totally. And that's probably one of the rare terms where an intervention works. But when I worked clinically, we would derive nutritional interventions to help people in extreme circumstances. And this is an extreme circumstance. What very rarely works for anyone is when they take an extreme intervention and apply it to just normal life as a way to manage health, because it's too profound and it's too short term. It creates the wrong mindset. So something like this should be managed under the supervision of people like me, and then always with the aim to get that person on a sustainable diet for life. So unless you're in this category, and if you are, you should gain guidance and advice from a health or medical professional. The sustainable route to having a healthy attitude towards carbohydrates is far better than inducing this type of approach to managing your diet. So the problem and the reason why people bought into low carb is because the average person just eats too much of everything, but certainly carbohydrates. So you should be having 2 to 4 grams per kilogram of your own body mass per day. And you might have a little bit more than 4 grams per kilogram if you're doing, long duration exercise most days of the week. So if, like Jacob and I, you've signed up to do an Ironman this year, you might on certain days take more than 4 grams per kilogram. But if you're just playing a bit of soccer or handball or basketball or hockey or tennis, you're going to be fine. 2 to 4 grams per day, 2 to 4 grams per kilogram of your own mass, and have a preference for quality. Prioritize minimally unprocessed source of carbohydrates. This notion of from the garden, farm, sea to plate, these are better things and ways to think about the food that we consume. Go for complex, slow carbohydrates over fast ones, refined, sugary types of carbohydrates. Timings of it, consumed during most active parts of the day. So trying when you've broken that fast, that middle part of the day, and immediately after exercise. So if you've just done a really good bout of exercise as a part of your recovery strategy, everybody's obsessed with protein, but it's a really good time to top up those glycogen stores and put some carbohydrate back into the system. So we're going to go into micronutrients and supplements, but I'm going to shut down the slide deck because we don't need slides for that. He says, if he can stop sharing, give me 2 seconds either whilst I remember how to do things. Let's have a look. I want it to stop. There we go. Bingo. You're back, Ida, which is great. I'm going to take a sip of water. So, Ida, I'm going to open up to you. I did want to, we've got a good 18 minutes left. people feel free to throw a question into the chat and I'll try and pick them up. But first of all, Ida, I'm going to invite you to comment on the information I've just shared. And if you feel appropriate, challenge any of those ideas.
Yeah. First of all, what a great presentation, Colin. I think for a lot of people, some of this information is new. And I saw some comments in the chat and the Q&A box. So well done. I, of course, agree with most of what you're saying, but I will maybe focus first a little bit about the fact when we're recommending to count calories. Because to me, it depends on the person that we are recommending this to. I want to really stress the importance of not counting calories on behalf of children or in children, because they need to grow up and have a healthy relationship to food. And when I'm working with athletes, I usually do these food records so that they are registering everything that they are consuming for 3 days or up to even a week. And the reason why I do that is not primarily because of the calories. I want them, as you discussed in your slides, I want them to have more knowledge about the food that they are consuming. Where are those proteins? Where can we find the good quality protein sources? Well, they need to read back on the backside of the label of food products, and also a lot of them are actually having an epiphany when I provide them with the results that they should consume more proteins usually. They should consume more carbohydrates. And if we're talking about handball, for example, a lot of them are struggling to meet their requirements for different macronutrients, especially carbohydrates, because they are training on very high intensity up to 10 hours, maybe even 15 hours per week. And a lot of them are not consuming enough protein. And that is especially athletes growing 18 to 20 years of age, for example.
Yeah.
And I also would like to discuss a little bit more about the time when we are counting calories. A lot of young people could go very deeply into counting calories, and we should, as friends or parents, also be on the look for not what is the right way to say this, but we should be concerned or aware that doing this for a very long time might also flip over to an unhealthy relationship to foods. So do it for a period of time for more knowledge about your food and your diet.
Yeah, I mean, there's two. Yeah, and they're both really valid points. And I know we've had a little bit of a chat about this before, but for everyone listening, there's an art to this, and I think that the critical one that I want to pick up on first, either, is this notion with regards to the impact on kids, and adopting a healthy mindset to nutrition with children. And if children learn a language about food that is all about reading labels and seeing how much something is, and that is a method of determining whether or not it's appropriate to eat that, then we are just continuing the problem. That just, it continues and it creates a problem. It creates another generation of people who are obsessed about food in the wrong way. It really does, because we know, and this is not controversial to say, but most of the traffic light systems, most of the label systems around the world are terrible. They're rubbish. The insight they give to food is really, really poor. And we don't want to add to that by getting them obsessed about counting the energy intake. So whilst it can be a vital means to what we do, kind of either turn that into a really positive, explain it, ground it for sure, but be careful, because children are so susceptible to this, and there's a global narrative that is so wrong about this that it's easy to fall into that trap. So I think that's critical, and I agree with you on that, either. And in hindsight, I should have emphasized that more as a part of the presentation. But something I want to ask you about that you mentioned is the athlete part, because because of my background working in sport, people will often say to me, well, what do this football team do? And the trouble I have with that, Ida, and I'm interested in your experience, is that all of us, we don't live lives like them. Trying to adopt and copy a diet that an elite athlete has when we're living normal lives is another effective way to get it all wrong. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, you said that we are not living like them, but my experience is that they are living like us. So the problems they are facing with their diet are the same problems we are facing. I have countless of examples of athletes who are eating as much as these ultra-processed foods as the general population. They are not meeting their requirements on vitamins and minerals, essential nutrients, even though they are eating twice as much as we are. Calories. So even though they are consuming much more food, they are not meeting their requirements. So I find that this very interesting. And they still need to start where we normal people should start. We need to focus on the foundation, on having those high quality foods, whole foods, good protein sources. We need to really focus on getting those essential fatty acids in our diet. And after we have laid the foundation, then we can start to talk with the athletes about top off, for example, focusing on specific ergogenic acids such as caffeine or timing of meals, how much they should focus prior to a match, during a match, and after a match. So the foundation needs to be in place before we can do anything. And the majority of my time, I will say up to 80%, is actually getting the athletes to understand the value of having a healthy diet and helping them finding solutions and taking responsible and meaningful choices in their everyday life. And then the rest, 20%, is all about this pre-match or training diet, what they should do during, after recovery, all of those specific athlete goals.
Yeah. And my experience is very similar. But that takes us now into this notion, which I didn't like spend too much time on just then, but I want us to go there now, especially as we have you here, is that, well, where does supplementation fit into all of this when we're looking at managing a mindset about sustainable diets? So where does supplementation fit into this whole complexity of getting our diet right?
The modern diet of 2024 is so poor that we need supplement in our foundation. We cannot get what we need from food alone. We are consuming 50 to 60% of ultra-processed foods, and as you have explained, these foods are very high in calories and they are low in nutrients. So the nutrients are missing and we need to fill that gap with supplements. And at Zinzino, our foundation in this approach is the health protocol, with restoring balance, restoring our gut microbiome, and really focusing on our immune system. So I always start there. And then, of course, there are many supplements we have in Zinzino fitting into a healthy lifestyle. For example, we should bring Lean Shake up in this discussion.
Yeah.
Amazing and well-tasting product as well. And that is not something that you see everywhere, that you have a high quality product and it tastes good. We have both in Lean Shake. But Lean Shake is a product for weight management. In those cases, you are replacing 1 meal a day with Lean Shake, so 2 sachets of Lean Shake, or for weight reduction, replacing 2 meals a day, meaning 4 sachets in totals. And I will also like to stress one other thing when we're talking about weight management, and that is the importance of really focusing on having synbiotic in our diet, because synbiotic is important for our weight management, more specifically because it helps to reduce those blood sugar spikes. So if we are taking synbiotic with a meal, with a meal with, for example, 50% carbohydrates or 40% carbohydrates, it will lower the blood sugar spike after that meal and makes us want to, or the cravings after that meal will be reduced. So if we have all of these spikes all the time, our blood sugar is going up and down and up and down, and that promotes cravings and eating in between meals.
Yeah, and I mean, interestingly as well, you know, when you look at dietary fiber intake, we talk a lot about deficiencies, but when we look at dietary fiber intake, the average person across Europe, North America, Australia, you know, in all those common territories, consumes on average less than 50% of the recommended dietary fiber intake per day. So people are deficient to 50%. When we look at the impact that has on the gut space, when we look at the impact that has on managing, you know, glycemic control, insulin response, both pre and post, with the amplitude of the curve when it comes to a meal, a product like Xenobiotic, it literally, I'm always reluctant to say it either, but I do agree, these become a part of the foundation. These become a part of the foundation because there are so many challenges that people face. They face it financially with regards to availability, accessibility to certain types of foods, palatability, taste, food familiarity, what they know about, how they can incorporate it. So something like that is really profound. But when you mention lean shake, I don't think we've discussed lean shake. I can't remember the last time we discussed lean shake. I can't remember the last time anyone put the spotlight on lean shake. And yet, as you'll be aware, I mean, it's a product I use every single day. There's not a day that I don't take a lean shake. It's such an effective way if you're post sport. That's typically when I use it, is after training. But for sure, if you're going to take those really measured steps to quantifying how much you consume, and yet you want something that's going to provide essential vitamins, minerals, a determined amount of calories so that you can really keep a check of what it is. You start to hit up your protein intake. I mean, something like that, we don't talk about it enough. You're right. And I'm glad you brought that up. These are key aspects of it. The health protocol drives a sustainable dietary change, but lean shake as a part of that. Maybe we should extend health protocol. Maybe it should have a fourth pillar in health protocol, but regards to what it provides, I don't know. It's food. It's no pun intended, but it's food for thought.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
what advice do you give to people that you're working with, whether it's sport or just in general health, when it comes to the selection over supplementation? Like how would you guide someone to say, here's how I know what's important to me?
Oh, that's a very good question. And it's so individual, the responses that I will answer to. But it depends on their diet. And as all of you know, we are in a lot of deficits and unbalances when we're talking about our body. So it really depends. Colin, do you have a little bit more like
So yeah, so let's say, I mean, because let's stay true to the theme of today. So we're talking about sustainable eating, people coming into the new year, probably wanting to make a positive change. And a lot of people, it's about weight management. So someone comes to you and says, right, either, you know, here's my diet, I'm looking to make changes. It's a very typical diet, 50, 60% processed, ultra processed food. I know there are deficiencies. What would be the top two tips you'd give them? Say, okay, start with this and this.
We know that people with overweight and obesity, they have been in an energy plus for a long time.
Yeah.
So the most important step, as you have been talking about in your presentation, is to create a negative energy balance. And to do that, we need to consume less energy than what we are actually using in a day. So my top priority then is, if we're going to do this very easy, replace one meal with lean shake a day for weight management. For weight loss, replace too. But I will also focus on the other side of the equation, and that is to create more movement, to create more exercise, and to create more physical activity during a day. And then we know, of course, that the health protocol is suitable for all people coming into either a clinic or to me or to you, Colin, because we know that we are facing the same differences and challenges in our diet. Either we are athletes or just a normal person.
You've just, with your comments then, you reminded me of something that I should have made this clear from the start. But what you said just reminded me. We're looking at reducing energy intake, but not nutrient intake. And often when people start to reduce down because they want to have less energy, they reduce blindly. And so then they start to starve their body of key nutrients they need in order to foster good health. And that is right at the core of what you've just been talking about. That is the essence of what you've just been talking about. And that is probably the most powerful take home people can take. Yeah.
And also, I would like to stress what you said in the beginning about sustainable changes and having consistency in what you do. And that is why we're calling it lifestyle changes and not a periodic change. We need to make sure that the positive changes we are implementing are feasible, doable, and manageable. So don't start off too high or too broad. Just start by taking one small step towards a positive change. And once that change and the behavior start to become a habit, then add on more. So we need to take small steps in the right direction, and then at the end of the year we can look back and be very happy about the changes we have made and that they have been sustainable.
Perfect. Perfect. And a perfect way to end. There are a few questions in the Q&A. I'll just address two of them really, really quickly, but that's the perfect bit. It's steps towards continued success. And don't measure how you're achieving in a week's time or a month's time, but let's talk about it again this time next year. And consistency is key. But just a few questions, and feel free to add to any of these responses. I'll still try and finish more or less on time. Someone said, what about a coffee in the morning? If you have a black coffee in the morning, that's not going to be a problem. Don't have too much caffeine anyway. So, bear that in mind. But if you're going to have a black coffee in the morning, that isn't going to interrupt your kind of fasting period if you're looking to offset your breakfast till around about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So that's not a problem. Someone else asked about stress and stress hormones and what they implicate on weight management. Hugely influential, the hugely inflammation and the control of inflammation, which is why I personally would pitch that omega-3 balance oil as a key part of the strategy with regards to achieving sustainable and meaningful weight loss in the short and long term, for sure. And then another question that someone had put in there, which is regards to how our appetite changes as we age, and there's typically less of a drive for appetite. And this is true. And one of the biggest changes as we age is that because we fail to target and maintain our muscle mass, there are changes, therefore, to our basal metabolic rate. Less muscle mass means that our body needs less energy, and this in turn takes our appetite low. So keep your muscle mass high. Be active, exercise, engage in the world. Life's an adventure. Do it every single day. Keep yourself live and organic and need an energy. Keep your appetite firing away all the way through life. Be hungry on every level throughout life. Thank you, Ida, for your amazing contributions to this. Thank you all for being here, listening to the information that we would like to share. We will welcome you back in 2 months' time. Until then, stay well, be kind to each other, and we'll see you further down the road. Speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.